for the next 90 minutes or so, after which there will be ample time for questions, comments, additional discussion. And we will do that at the end with a raise hand feature. So please reserve the chats with the panelists for emergency communication, right? In case you don't realize that, I am not reading the chat right now. I'm talking to you, right? All right, let's do it. And as always, before we jump into the first point here, what we need to do is give ourselves a foundation, a strong basis on which to build the rest. You know, as I was reading recommendations about how to deliver online, it was striking to me again how most advice out there is unfounded. Maybe it's good advice, maybe not. How can you tell without an objective against which to gauge the effectiveness? Well, what's the objective? I asked my training participants, I asked some of you almost a year ago in Sao Paulo, right? What's effective communication? What's the name of the game? What is it we are trying to achieve here? And you told me effective communication is getting the message across. I love that expression, but what does it mean? Well, people tell me it's making sure that the audience understands the message. Now, understanding is central, but it's not enough. What's a prerequisite for the audience to understand? Well, you first need to get them to, yes, pay attention. So it's no surprise you are so concerned about engaging your audience. Now, why would it be different for a remote presentation? Well, because there are so many other things the audience could be doing under cover of listening to you, right? That's one question that you asked at registration. How to engage the audience, you said, with so many distractions on the other side of the screen, right? Is any of you right now reading email, for example? Some of you would do that in person in an auditorium as well, but most of you would be a little self-conscious, think it's rude if I can see you, and yet you think it's perfectly okay if I cannot see you, right? So remotely, we will have to be better at getting the attention if we want the audience to understand the message. Even understanding is not the end of the story. Why do we want them to understand? Well, typically, we want them to do something with the message we deliver to them. So the expression getting the message across, we clarified what getting across means. The next question, what's a message? Let me propose that we make a difference between information on the one hand and message on the other hand by saying that a message is an interpretation of the information. What does it mean? What does it mean for the audience we are addressing? What does it mean for the purpose we have in mind when communicating? If information is the answer to the question, what? As in, what did you find in your research work, in your master thesis, whatever? Then the message is much more the answer to the question, so what? So what? That's the fundamental question to select content. Again, some of you at registration asked these two questions. How to address a huge amount of information in a brief presentation? And let me quote another one. How to make a presentation with simplicity and clarity of ideas? Well, the answer is, above all else, focus on the message, the so what. You do understand what the so what means, right? It's not what are you saying as much as why are you saying that? Why are you saying that to us, the audience? Are we supposed to do anything with it or about it? To a point, the so what includes an even more aggressive question, which is, who cares? If you want to engage your audience, that's the first thing to do, isn't it? Make them care about your research work. So rule number 0, have messages, and then get them across. If it's a research talk, well, you might have to present a whole year of research, 12 months, in perhaps just 12 minutes. What do you do then? Oh, you do what you always do in life, optimization under constraints. How many messages can you get across in just 12 minutes? Now, getting across means that this maximization here is on the side of the audience. The goal is not to say as much as possible, it is to make sure that the audience gets as much as possible out of your talk. How do you do that? Well, let's derive 3 laws of communication by applying our idea of optimization under constraints here to a simple communication model. Me, the channel, my audience. You want to optimize? Okay. Where are the constraints? And where are the degrees of freedom? Well, the biggest constraint is the audience. They are who they are. They may not have the background knowledge you wish they had about your topic. That's a fact. You have to live with that. The freedom is on your side. You choose what to say, you choose how to say it. So, first law of communication, the most obvious one in theory, the most difficult one in practice, adapt to your audience. You want the result? You want them to pay attention, to understand, and to act upon your messages? Well, then, you do the effort. You do what it takes to get there. Adapting to the audience is always difficult, but again, more so when you don't get feedback at all from the audience. And that was plain to see, again, in the questions you asked at registration. Let me quote another 2, I can't resist. Here's one: how to read a room that you are not seeing. And the other one: how to know if the audience is following your talk without seeing their faces. I suspect these quotes here are from the more experienced among you. Some very young speakers, they never even look at the audience. They're not going to miss the feedback they don't get. But some of you, you have a feel for the room, and that is a big frustration. Well, nothing to do about it, except that if you can no longer adapt on the moment, you must do a better job of adapting in advance, of analyzing the needs of the audience in advance. Adapting is the only rule you need in an ideal world. Put the message on one side, it arrives on the other side untouched. In a real world, lots of things could happen along the way, things you could designate globally with the word noise. Anything that can distract the audience away from the message. In your questions, there was a lot about that, distractions. What kind of distractions are we talking about, huh? Well, when I discussed noise in Sao Paulo just last year, some of you will remember it was about nervous mannerisms, filler words like or meaningless animations on slides, and so on. But if you are now delivering from your office or from your home, one major source of noise is your background, the room behind you. There was a story like that in the news just about a month ago about the head of a police union in New York City giving a television interview. Would you please look at this? There is, of course, all the noise that Fox News adds at the bottom of your television screen here, but that's not what I'm talking about. Instead, look at how much can distract you in the background. And look at what it tells you about the speaker. For example, here, the news media didn't fail to notice the mug promoting QAnon, which, as some of you may know, is a far-right conspiracy theory, right? Well, perhaps it was there intentionally, perhaps not, but in any case, it got more noticed and more talked about than what the speaker actually said. Well, okay, that's police and politics. Researchers, people like you, they always want to show off with their bookcases. Instead of listening to them, you can check out their readings. You can go, hey, I know that book. It can be very distracting. Relax. Zoom has got you covered with, guess what? Virtual backgrounds. Ugh, three problems here. First, and unless you are speaking in front of an actual green screen like they used to make movies, you will be glitching in and out of your virtual background all the time, especially if you've got fuzzy hair or multicolored clothes. It just looks wrong. Second, some of these backgrounds are animated. This palm tree will move in the wind behind you, and movement is very distracting. Third, these background images are irrelevant to your message anyway. Well, unless you are discussing summer vacations on tropical beaches, perhaps. So, simple rule here. If you want to keep the attention of the audience on your messages, don't give them anything else to look at. You do not achieve anything by making them pay attention, yes, but to the wrong thing. The attention does not get transferred from the virtual background to your messages. So, what do we do about distractions? What do we do about noise? Well, obviously, we try to get rid of it, to filter it out, to bring it down. That's the absolute priority. Beyond reducing the noise, however, we could also increase what is not noise, namely the signal. Well, some of you must have seen this one before in other contexts. Second law of communication, maximize the signal to noise ratio. Yes, it's about electrical signals originally. It works for optical signals and possibly biological signals, but it works wonders for communication. Still, it's not enough. Even if you remove all distractions from your own presentation, you cannot remove all distractions on the side of the audience, the other side of the screen, like you said. If they are listening to you from their home, from their backyard, perhaps, they can still be distracted by so many things around them. Expect losses. Every so often, you will say something, they will miss it. Well, you can minimize those losses with a high signal to noise ratio, but you cannot realistically bring the losses down to zero. What you can do, however, is compensate for the potential losses by using some sort of redundancy. Right now, I'm talking to you and I'm using slides. If you do not understand everything I say for any reason, hopefully you can get what's on my slides. And if you cannot see my slides for any reason, it should not matter much as long as you can understand what I say. I've got two chances. Now, don't take redundancy as an invitation to fill your slides with text. You know how distracting that can be, don't you? What we want here instead of that is effective redundancy, that is a synergy. Your slides should be enough, your speech should be enough to get your point across, and the two should work well together, not compete with each other for the attention of the audience. We will need to discuss that. Anyway, here's our foundation, whether in person or remotely. We must adapt to our audience, maximize the signal to noise ratio, and use effective redundancy to get our messages across. And with that in mind, we can now get into the first point. We can now identify the decisions we must make. In this respect, let me challenge you with the following question. Why do we even give remote presentations? They are much harder for the speakers to deliver, and they are harder for the audience to follow. Why do we do them? Oh, don't come and tell me that it's because we can no longer all be in the same place at the same time. It's not a reason. So a conference cannot take place. Well, how about we replace all the research talks by research papers? Papers are a form of remote communication that's been around for centuries. Why talks? Is it to ask questions to the speaker? You could really ask questions in writing if you wanted to. Now, if you ask me, talks have got something essentially human that papers don't have. Or perhaps I should say something essentially animal that papers don't have, namely non-verbal communication. Right? When you listen to a speaker delivering, say, a research talk, you have verbal communication, of course, what the speaker says. The part of the presentation you could put in writing if you wanted to. But then there is what you cannot put in writing or not easily, and that's how the speaker says it using his or her voice, so vocal delivery. And then there is everything you can see, body language, facial expression, all the way to dress code. If the presentation were a music video, you would call these three elements of delivery the lyrics, the music, the dance. And when I ask my workshop participants, what makes you believe a speaker? They tell me the projected confidence of the speaker. It's not so much what the speaker said as how the speaker said it with his or her voice and body. So credibility is mainly non-verbal. So non-verbal communication is one thing we must strive to preserve in remote presentations, and that's precisely the technological challenge. Oh, non-verbal is more than voice and body, of course. If you use slides, these might include both text and figures, just like a paper, and the figures are also non-verbal, at least if you design them well, which is another thing that we don't learn in school, unfortunately. What happens when you deliver your presentation remotely, using technology, using sound and vision, to quote David Bowie here? Well, clearly, you get the verbal component, what the speaker says, that's sound. You may think nonverbal communication is vision. Well, that is certainly the case for visual communication, body language, but vocal delivery, which is nonverbal and a big part of credibility, it's sound, not vision. You will see how that can help us out. In contrast, for slides, you have verbal and nonverbal communication, but both of them are vision and no longer sound, not even the text. So if we think technology for remote communication, we'll assume we have the sound in any case, like a phone call or a radio program, but the whole question will be, what do we show to the audience? We will have to make a decision. That will be the frustration. Remember how our key concern today is engaging the audience? Well, here's a question that you asked so many times at registration time. It's about duration. Let me just quote you. One of you said, what is the best presentation duration to get the full attention of the audience? And another one of you said, how long is too long for a presentation? Well, let me answer that in an indirect way. My in-person presentations are often long. I speak alone for almost 2 hours. In contrast, sometimes a 5-minute presentation is boring because it's too long for the content, right? So it really depends. But when I speak for 2 hours, I often have attendees come to me at the end and say, wow, you kept my attention for 2 hours straight. How did you do that? Well, as always, it's a combination of factors. Hopefully I said interesting things, but you know, it's not enough. If you ask me about duration, I would tell you it's like a good movie, which can also keep your attention for an hour and a half or even 2 hours. So here's the key of a good movie. At every single moment, give the audience something relevant, something meaningful to look at and to listen to. You must focus their attention where you want it to be. When I deliver in person, I achieve this focus in part with how I interact with my slides. Let's see if I can demonstrate here. Imagine, this is me, my slides are here. I'm looking at the audience looks at me, I command attention. I can use my body language to project confidence to appear credible. But if I want them to look at the slides, I will point at the slides with my hand and with my eyes. And their eyes will follow my eyes and go to the screen. And if I want the attention back on me, I will bring my eyes back and my hand back to my side. Now they're looking at me again. I decide what they pay attention to at any given moment. This is not something you can easily achieve with a laser pointer, you realize? I mean, with a laser pointer, you can send them to the screen, but you cannot easily bring them back. So you become a voiceover and you lose a major asset for credibility, which is body language. You become a voiceover, right? That's the only thing you have left. Now, I know it's a little more difficult if the screen is really big or if it's really high, but you can still always kind of physically point at your slides and then bring your hand back. Can you see what the problem is with remote technology now? This visible, physical interaction between you and your slides is hard to capture online, except with sophisticated technologies such as what they use for the weather report, perhaps, and even so. Your slides would necessarily be kind of small compared to slides shown full screen, and they could easily be a problem for audiences watching you on a tablet or, who knows, on a smartphone. Oh, you could certainly use a bigger font, but then you don't put much on a slide anymore. And if the camera shot must capture both the speaker and the screen, then the speaker may look needlessly distant. And in any case, it's hard to have both the speaker and the slides look right live on a single camera shot, if you even have the equipment and the space for it at home, right? I've tried myself projection screens, I've tried monitors, I've tried printed sheets of paper. It was disappointing every time. When the slides were nicely contrasted, the speaker was in the dark. And when the speaker looked good, the slides were unreadable. Again, you could tell me, hey, relax. Zoom has got you covered. It captures the speaker and the slides separately. So no problem. Right. Well, yes, the slides are larger, more readable, possibly even at a higher resolution than the best projector in any lecture room. In contrast, with screen sharing, the speaker is typically shown very small. In recordings of Zoom presentations that I watch online, the image of the speaker is between 10 and 20% of the slide in width, meaning between 1 and 4% of the slide in area. That's tiny. And the speaker is probably looking down at his or her own screen, not at the camera, not making eye contact with the audience. Still, the real issue is not even tiny speaker and large slides. The issue is that speaker and slides are disconnected. Instead of working together in synergy, like we said, speaker and slides now compete for the attention of the audience. To a point, it's even worse if the speaker is looking at the camera because the competition is stronger. Which do you watch? You know, the first time I had to give a Zoom webinar, I was not very familiar with the technology, but I did realize this disconnect between the speaker and the slides. And I thought, even from my tiny little speaker window there in the corner, I could still point at my slides on the screen and focus the attention of the audience at least a little bit. So ahead of the session, I asked the host, well, where is my little speaker window going to be positioned with respect to my slides? I didn't want to be pointing to the right of me if the slides were to the left of me, right? Well, you probably know the answer to that. It depends. It depends on the client application. It depends on the size of their screen, but mostly it depends on the choices the audience makes. They can move the speaker window anywhere they want, make it larger or smaller, or make it go away and just look at the slides. As an audience, you may think this flexibility is wonderful. As a speaker, you feel that you lose control. So, what are we going to do about that? Well, the first possibility is to make a choice ourselves between speaker and slides. You could certainly decide to give a presentation without slides, just you. Chances are the audience will choose to look at you, or at least they cannot look at slides because there are no slides. If you do it right, and we will see what that means for delivery a little later, such a presentation will feel more natural to the audience, more like someone is actually talking to them. Also, it better shows body language, so it has the potential to project confidence and convey credibility. And with fewer visual distractions and stronger eye contact, it can be much more engaging. I guess many of you are thinking right now, a research talk without slides? No way. Well, I have seen research talks without slides that were pretty amazing, but in any case, not every presentation you are going to deliver remotely is going to be a research talk. So keep this option in mind. One day you will find that speaking without slides is exactly what you need. Obviously, you could take the opposite approach, slides only, with a speaker as a voiceover. What would be the advantages? Well, first, you avoid a potential source of noise, namely the tiny speaker in the corner competing with slides for the attention of the audience. You know, if your presentation is heavy on relevant schematics and graphs, then showing slides only allows the audience to focus on them. Second, slides require far less bandwidth for a higher resolution. Do the math. A slide shown full screen is actually many more pixels than a camera, but it compresses well because of all the white space, and it may not change for a minute or even longer compared to the camera, which is 30 frames per second. So that's one concern that some of you had again, and I've got a number of questions on my list here about poor internet connection. If you know as a speaker that you have a low speed connection, limited bandwidth, go for slides only with your voice, of course. You want a third advantage? Slides only is easier for the speaker. Oh, usually I wouldn't care. As I said, if you want the result, you do the effort. Still, the idea remains to optimize the experience for the audience under constraints. And yes, a good voiceover is better than a bad speaker on camera. Still, those of you who know me know that I usually want it all. I want to show myself as a speaker, I want to show my slides, and I want to decide what the audience pays attention to at any given time. Best solution I found for that, the one that you see me apply today in this presentation, is to show both the speaker and the slides, yes, but not at the same time. Alternating. Isn't this the ultimate way to decide what the audience can focus on at any given moment? You want them to focus on your slides? Well, don't show yourself. You want them to focus on you instead? Stop showing slides and show yourself instead. If you think of it, this is really very much like a newscast on television, which is a useful model for a remote presentation. Central to a news bulletin, a newscast on TV, is the news anchor who establishes credibility with body language. So he or she is shown by default, making eye contact with the camera. But if there is interesting footage to be shown, that footage replaces the news anchor with a voiceover. So there's only one question left. How do we do that without an entire television studio or an entire television crew? Well, It is really like TV, really, in the sense that you've got two options, recording or live. Now, a recording may seem like cheating to you. You think, oh, come on, this is not a real presentation, but it is an option to consider seriously. Plus, some of you must have noticed conferences are increasingly asking for recorded presentations when they go virtual. Main benefit for you, the speaker, is the possibility to edit your video and to improve it by iterations. So first, you record yourself delivering the presentation as if there were no slides. And obviously, you do so with the best camera you have, which is probably the camera on your smartphone rather than the camera on your laptop. And if you're not happy with your performance, you know what? You just do it again. Next, you mix in slides at specific times for specific durations. So the slides replace the image of you, but never your voice. Okay, the voice is continuous from beginning to end. It's not that hard to do with even simple applications. I'm on the Mac, I can do that with iMovie, but you can find any simple video editing, it should do the trick. Strictly speaking, in the video editing, you could add the slides next to you if you wanted to. But like we said, they would be kind of small. So what's the benefit for conference organizers? Well, two. First, a better technical quality, because the quality then no longer depends on your connection speed with the system. And second, less work. If they were going to record the presentations and make them available online afterwards anyway, you did the work for them. You can still be available live to answer questions the day that they are going to stream your recording as part of the presentation. Now, drawback, video editing can take a lot of time, especially if you've never done something like that before. Alternative, a live session like I am doing for you today. Sometimes you have to, sometimes you want to, because it allows you to adapt to what the previous speaker has said. Oops. And here you see a typical example of a mishap in PowerPoint, which allows, not in PowerPoint, in the video stream, which allows me to discuss another point that you had in your presentations, which is how to handle mishaps. Well, what you saw a second ago was my video freezing, and that, believe it or not, is a bug in Apple computers, I've been told, happens so often. Well, there is no miracle there. You basically take a deep breath and fix the issue. What else can you do, right? Now, the one thing that I wanted to illustrate, and hopefully it worked, is that in Zoom, you have an option when you share your screen that says, pause the sharing. So I paused the sharing on a slide. I could do lots of manipulations that hopefully you didn't see. I hope it works. And I can fix the issue and then come back in front of you. That's a very useful one when you have to fix something and you want it to do it behind the scene, in a sense. I was saying, so how do you do a live presentation? Well, the straightforward way in Zoom would be to start, stop, share screen, right? So let's consider your laptop. Let's assume you are sharing your video like so. Now, when you want the audience to focus on your slides, you simply share them by starting share screen, but your video stream would still be shown small somewhere and can distract. Oh, you could turn off your video, but you might get a placeholder instead of it, which could also distract the audience a little bit. Still, if you want the focus on you again, you stop screen share, you start your video again if you had stopped it, and then your video gets large again, possibly full screen. Well, unless the audience changed how they choose to view the session, and that is one weakness of this approach. The other weakness is that starting or stopping share screen on the one hand and starting or stopping your video stream on the other hand requires several manipulations. So it's slow, it's possibly clumsy. And that's because you have to handle two channels in a sense, the video and the screen. So another approach would be to alternate video and slides within the same channel. For example, by sharing your video through share screen instead of through regular Zoom video. And you may have noticed that this is what I'm doing in this lecture. My Zoom video is off, but you can see me if I choose that you can see me. That no longer depends on your setting. It allows you to switch. It allows me as speaker to speech faster, more naturally from speaker to slides, from slides to speaker. What's the magic trick, huh? Well, consider again what the speaker sees, not what the audience sees. Obviously, you can display your slides. My slides are PDF, so I'm displaying them with a PDF reader. The trick to find an application that displays your video stream on your screen. Me on the Mac, I'm using QuickTime Player. I ask for a new video recording and ta-da, I see myself. You can find similar apps for other operating systems. The one in Windows, I think, is called Camera. Now, my favorite feature specifically in Zoom is sharing only a portion of the screen. You know, when you click share screen, you will find that under the advanced tab in there. You see this green outline here? It's the part of the screen that you share. Well, can you guess now? Adjust your slides to the portion of the screen that you share. Adjust your video to the portion of the screen that you share. So yes, the video comes on top, but the slides are still there, right? Let me demonstrate here. Hopefully the technology works. See, so this is my video and my slide is right there in another window behind the window that shows my video. And there you go. All right. Now you simply switch applications to alternate speaker with slides. And you can switch applications maybe with a keyboard shortcut, or maybe you can do that using the mouse button. Myself, I coded a few hacks to assign the switch to a button I was not using anyway on my remote control. See this little button right here? If I click it, I go to my slides, where I can still use the previous button and the next button. And if I click it again, I'm back to my video, right? I see some of you have raised hands. I really prefer to keep the questions to the end. Keep your question in mind. I will answer it later on, I promise. Now, this little hack here, it's somewhere on the notes I'm going to share with you, don't worry. But still, kids, don't try this at home if you are easily intimidated by computers. It's like with everything. It's not that hard if you know what you are doing, but if not, then it's a bit of trial and error, which was my case, of course. Now, if you really understand what it is we are doing here, then you realize that you could also bring in another window, possibly with your slides there. See, that's a little window with my slides. I could have both of them, but it's kind of small and it's not like I can really point at them. So I'm not convinced by this approach here. You could be creative and you could say, well, let's redesign the slides to have the square. So I use only a vertical part for the video, like so, but you still cannot actually point at your slides, right? So let's go back to our speaker screen here. Why am I not sharing a bigger portion of my screen? Well, that's just to go easy on the bandwidth. It should be just enough resolution for the slides to be sharp, while keeping the video small enough that it doesn't get all jerky like you must have seen sometimes, right? And that is partly out of your control, admittedly. The biggest problem, potential problem, one that some of you might be experiencing right now, in fact, and others of you not, it's a delay, a lag between the words that you hear and the movements of my mouth. It depends on the speed between the speaker and the system and between the system and the attendees. It will happen with all video conferences system. Not much you can do about it. Oh, maybe two precautions. In fact, as a speaker and as an audience member. First, quit all the applications that you don't need on your computer that will help the CPU. And second, get the rest of your household offline for the duration of your talk. Change the password of the Wi-Fi or something like that, right? So our second option here, it allows for a faster, more natural switching between the video and the slides, but the risk is poorer synchronization of the speaker words and the mouth, at least for some attendees, but not necessarily for all of them. All in all, it's still the best compromise I have found in Zoom so far. But for example, it does not work very well in WebEx or in Microsoft Teams, where the mismatch between the words and the picture of the speaker is much worse for some reason. So if I have to use WebEx, for example, I'll go with the first option, which is start and stop a share screen. But there is a last option, which is currently in beta testing in Zoom and in third-party applications. And in a sense, it's the reverse of option 2. It's sharing now the slides through the video by using them as a virtual background. So you could potentially point at your slides now, like the weather forecaster on TV points at a virtual map. But yeah, you'd be in front of your slides, right? And as we've said, you would need a pretty good green screen at home if you don't want to glitch in and out of your slides like a ghost, especially when you move. Myself, I find that alternating is a better way to control the attention. Now, I must tell you, I'm a beta tester for such an application that's not out there yet. I found I could trick it into alternating me and my slides through my Zoom video. Advantage, I have better synchronization than share screen, but there is a but. The quality of the slides was unfortunately much lower than with share screen because now Zoom thinks it's a video. It doesn't know it's a slide anymore. So the choice depends on the compromise you want to make, which in turn may depend on the application you are using. Right now, I'm on Zoom. Slide quality is important to me. So I go with option 2, which is sharing a portion of my screen and deciding what I display in there at any given moment. And there is one more reason. The side benefit of sharing only part of my screen is the space it frees for other useful items. If you want me to finish on time, for example, I need a timer or a clock. You do get the difference between the two, right? If your presentation is a fixed duration, like 12 minutes, no matter what time you start, then what you need is a timer, something that shows you graphically, if possible, how much time you have left. But if you are in my situation, I want to finish on time, even if I start 10 minutes late, then what I want is not a timer, it's a clock, a big analog clock, not a small digital one hidden somewhere in the menu bar of my computer, right? Now, what I also have on my screen is the list of participants, a list of you. So I can see hands raised during questions and answers. Again, I see some of you raising hands. I'll explain why later, but I would really like questions at the end of the presentation to keep it on track. Anything urgent, you can write it in the chat, but not questions at the moment. Oh, by the way, speaking of what you could have on your screen that you don't share with the audience, some of you are probably thinking right now that they can use the space for speaker notes to jog your memory if needed. Yes, but that's not without danger, especially for eye contact. We'll discuss it. And yes, somewhere on your screen, you'll have your Zoom controls. Good. We have made decisions about which channels to use, just you, or just slides, or both, but then perhaps alternating. Now we can take care of setting the stage for our presentation, of setting up our environment. And this one is dear to my heart. It fascinates me how few people dare to modify their environment, even in the most elementary ways, like rearranging tables in a classroom or even erasing the whiteboard before they start their class. We are going to have to do much more than that. Why? Well, because whether you deliver from home or from your office or perhaps from a hotel room, your little workspace is probably suboptimal to deliver remotely, especially if you work on a laptop. If your keyboard is at the right height, then your built-in camera is too close. You are getting too intimate with your audience, and especially the camera is at a poor angle for video conferencing. Even if you take some distance from it to avoid being intimate, you are looking down on the audience. And the room looks wrong because the perspective of the walls and ceiling is unusual. And that's still the best case. If you sit back, you may be out of frame. I'm sure you've seen this before with some speakers. Okay, let's fix both problems here. First, position your laptop higher by propping it up on a pile of boxes or books, something stable. Next, move it further away from you. As you do all of this, what you want is to have your camera at eye level. So it's a bit of trial and error, but with books or notepads, you should be able to adjust to a fine level. Okay, your camera is positioned correctly now, but your keyboard is not. Well, you can use an external keyboard if you have one at hand, but myself, I find that a mouse is usually enough, besides, of course, my remote control. Or you could use an external camera, again at eye level, of course, and then have your laptop close to you. Two potential problems here. First, I see many speakers using an external camera who then have their laptop on the side, and then they look like they are checking email or something instead of talking to you. Second, even if you position your laptop in the direction of your external camera, you will be visibly looking down when glancing at your screen for any reason. It's far less obvious with a built-in camera, at least if you position it at a sufficient distance from you, like we said. See for yourself. This is me looking at the little green light that indicates the position of my built-in camera. And this is me looking at the video of myself on my computer screen. Do you see any noticeable difference? Probably not. Of course, if you remember, I decided to share in Zoom the top portion of my screen near my camera, and this is not an accident, it's intentional. If you prefer to use an external camera, but you like this idea of looking like you make eye contact even when you don't, just put your laptop screen as close as possible to the camera. That's the idea of teleprompters on television. News anchors read text that is displayed right in front of the camera lens. If you feel your laptop is now too far away for the built-in microphone to pick your voice well, then yes, consider using an external microphone. Still, this is not about money, okay? This is not about investing money in accessories. This is about investing time in your setup. This is about doing what you can with what you have, where you are, to quote this time Theodore Roosevelt, right? So myself, I am simply using my built-in camera and my built-in microphone. Okay, yes, I know I'm spoiled. I have a very nice laptop, but still, let me share 3 tips with you that cost probably nothing and that can make a big difference. The first is tilting your laptop so you can use your keyboard more easily, should you need to. And I suspect it's a bit better for the microphone as well, because the microphone is usually next to the keyboard. You can buy special laptop stands to do that, or you can make your own setup. Second tip is to replace your chair by a stool, something without back to look like you are standing, even though you are sitting. I would stay away in particular of desk chairs, which can swivel and rock and roll, very distracting. And the third tip is to think beyond you and your computer, with or without accessories. Think of what's behind you, in plain sight, and think of where the light is coming from. Second law, maximize the signal to noise ratio. Remember? We discussed the ever-present bookcases. Well, one variation on that theme is the backyard, which can also be distracting, even if pretty, and which creates a classic backlight issue, like you see here. Now, light is an art, and we can argue forever about details, such as, for example, side light. You see how one side of the speaker's face here is well lit, and the other side is in the dark? Okay, it's no disaster. I would be happy if every speaker I ever saw deliver remotely looked as good. But if you care about details, that's one. More distracting, I find, is the set of frames behind the speaker. She could easily have taken them down. If possible, have a neutral, uniform background, perhaps literally a backdrop like they use for stage plays. Remember the bookcase I keep showing you? Well, it's right here behind me, but it is hidden with this gray duvet cover. Oh, speaking of artistic details, you know how in every photography class, they tell you not to center the subject of your composition, but to position it at 1/3, for example. Should we do the same here? Apply the rule of thirds for the speaker video too? Well, it looks better, even if not perfectly balanced, perhaps, but it's impractical for hand gestures. I recommend you give yourself the freedom to do hand gestures. See the idea? Show that you are a problem solver and make sure you know why you do what you do. To give you just one very concrete example, let me show you what it all means for my home office, where I am right now. So yes, I first had to declutter an area that is usually reserved for storage. You will immediately notice the roof window, which is typically an excellent option for natural light, and you will recognize the gray duvet cover hiding my bookcase. I did not have a spare table, unfortunately, but I have boxes of notepads that I use for my workshops, so I can pile them up to bring my laptop high enough. To sit down comfortably, yet be straight, I use our piano stool, which is adjustable. Isn't that nice? You know, my preference would be standing, and we'll discuss it. But it's impractical here because my roof window is kind of low, and because the tower of boxes for my laptop might get a bit unstable if I bring it too high. As a stand for the laptop, I use what is really a cafeteria tray, which I normally use for my breakfast. And to tilt the laptop, I use a little plastic box which used to contain business cards. I know it looks like a precarious balance, but it's actually very stable. Because when the screen of a laptop is open, it makes a sharp angle, which kind of locks on the little box. Plus, the laptop cannot slide thanks to the raised edges of the tray. Oh, there are many other ways to tilt a laptop, of course, and if you doubt the stability, you know what they say. If you cannot fix it with duct tape, then you have not used enough duct tape. So don't take risks, okay? Do what you have to do so it is stable. I find that this here gives me enough of a tilt to have easy access to the keyboard. Oh, did you notice? The sun just came out from a cloud as I was taking this shot. Well, natural light is nice, but too much is too much. You can, in fact, easily modulate light in front of a window with paper, like this paper screen right here. Now, where do I put down my mouse and my remote control? Well, can you guess? A few more boxes, a tin board on top, attached with duct tape, and I have what I call a micro desk. And on this picture, you can tell that I am right-handed, right? We all set for daytime sessions. If I speak at night, I need light. My ceiling lights are no good, so this is what I came up with. Cheap light globes, one left and one right, at eye level as well. Imagine me sitting on that piano stool. That is where I am right now talking to you. Now, your place may look very different, of course. And here, for example, is a photograph posted on LinkedIn by Taylor Sparks, who is a professor at the University of Utah, after he attended this